Tell me your impressions of Walz, because you have a very strong view about Tim Walz. Because I just want you to talk about him a little bit, because he's kind of hard to. A lot of people are kind of figuring him out. I think it's the dumbest decision she's made. It's the only decision she has made, really, on her own. And she said so. This is her own real decision. Stupid decision. Should have picked Shapiro. Obviously, Pennsylvania would be with her right now, and it would be. But anyway, what do you make of Tim Walz?
So I'm a Minnesotan. I went back there as an adult. My mother still lived there in the little town I grew up in. Minnesota was a very functional, tolerant, rather progressive state that in 2020 changed forever, okay? The riots and the George Floyd turbulence drove people out, okay? A crime wave that has not abated began then. I'm just telling you the truth. And Tim Walz presided over it. He really did. And I didn't know who he was. I just knew there was a governor by that name. And anybody who was in charge of Minnesota during a time when I think the state really went astray wasn't going to impress me much. But when he came out as the choice, the immediate effect on me was one of a terrible allergy, because I was seeing someone who is actually from the Midwest. He actually grew up in Nebraska, which Midwesterners know all the different shades of being a Midwesterner. And like J.D. Vance from Ohio, from, sort of middle Ohio, is from a very different culture than a man like Tim Walz from Nebraska, who then moves to Minnesota. But he was instantly, to my mind, a kind of white minstrel who was performing what biographically he is, a son of, the Midwest, but doing it so broadly. You can meet an Irishman in a bar and he's actually an Irishman, but he's telling you lies, and he's, says he saw a leprechaun and, one time while drinking a Guinness under a toadstool. And they called him professional Irishman. This guy's a professional Midwesterner, and he's actually so broad, and he's playing to stereotypes. He is the Washington, D.C. idea of a Midwesterner, and he's a fraud. And I could see through every gesture, every fake, folksy, expression, and he just made my skin crawl, because it was sort of like, if I was black and I saw someone doing an Uncle Tom act, frankly, to please, white elites. And it was like a white Uncle Tom act to me. And I thought, this is actually destructive, because the guy is, first of all, I can't tell whether, he knows his stuff or not. But whatever else he is, he sort of hates the people that he is among, because he won't act naturally. He doesn't have to have a damn hunting vest on and carrying a shotgun and working on his truck and doing all these things all the time. I mean, give it a break. And I was like, this is just false. And then also I went, this is a guy whose true self is underneath all this somewhere, and I suspect resembles it not at all. Mm-hmm. And just a phony. The
thing that interests me about him was his absolute obsession with China for a long time. Like, well, he was going there all the time. He was trying to teach kids about China, taking kids to China. It's kind of strange obsession that he had.
That's readable to a Midwesterner, because I'll tell you that when I was growing up, the Democratic Party, and it still is named this in Minnesota, was the Democratic Farmer Labor Party. Mm-hmm. And the head of the Communist Party in America, Gus Hall, who ran for president, was from Minnesota. And Eugene McCarthy, the most left-wing person ever to come within spitting distance of the presidency, I guess maybe other than Henry Wallace back when, was from Minnesota. And so was, George McGovern, as I mentioned before. So a kind of ultra egalitarianism bordering on socialism or communism is something you see there. It kind of goes back to William Jennings Bryan in some way. And so he seems to be of that cut.